My name is Kevin. I'm with Springfield Leather. We've had a number of requests for a helpful video on how to do the double loop stitching and how to splice it, how to end it, and how to do the double loop stitching on a single piece of leather where you don't have two pieces to splice between. So I'm going to show you that. For whatever it's worth, I'm probably the world's, maybe not the best lacer, but I'm right up there in the top 10. And I get it done in a hurry. So I'm going to give you a lot of little tips and hints along the way. You may want to write some down because this is going to be helpful for some of you, I'm sure. First of all, there's basically 3 types of lacing needles that you can use. And I'm sure somebody's going to get a picture of them here pretty soon. You can use a 2-prong lacing needle. You can use a hook and eye lacing needle, or you can use a permalock. Now, you use whatever needle you like after you get the hang of this. I like the 2-prong lacing needle. Half the people in the world think I'm nuts. I think the other half are nuts that don't like that, but that's your choice. That's okay. The little permalock needle is the brass one, which I don't know if you can see it here or not, but this brass one has to screw onto your lace. And in order to do that, your lace has to have a happy little point. So you snip it off there till you've got this happy little point on your lace, and then you stick that point in the inside of the needle and you screw it onto there, and that works and is fine. I just have never been a big fan of it, but it's okay. Okay, first tip, you always lace with the tooled side of the leather facing you, me. I'm going to lace with the tooled side facing me. That's important. Don't forget, you got to do that. Otherwise, it's just not going to look right. You always lace from left to right. You always do that. Otherwise, it's not going to look right. Okay, so now we're ready. I'm going to get a piece of lace, thread a needle, and be right back. I've got my needle threaded. I've chosen some natural lace so that as we go through this, you'll be able to see how the lacing lays. Now, another tip is you never lace with a piece of lace that is longer than about a yard or a yard and a half. You just don't do that, because if you take that whole piece of lace, that 7 yards that comes with your wallet kit, and you pull that through 47 million holes, pretty soon you end up with a piece of lace that's all fuzzy in the back and the weak points have stretched out, and then it breaks, and then you get mad. And plus there's always enough lace laying down there by the chair to where your cat gets tangled up in it. That's not happy. So you lace with about a yard and a half of lace. That's it, at the most. I typically pull off not even quite that much, but that's okay. So looking at the tooled side is staring me in the face. I'm going to go through a hole. Boy, is this part easy. Oh, and I forgot. Now, I punch these holes with a chisel. It doesn't matter. You can use a round hole punch if you want. Doesn't matter. It's all the same. I happen to like a chisel. You start out by pulling that lace through until you got about an inch sticking up, and then you go through the next hole. Now, most of this is really, really simple. For some of you if you don't have really strong fingers, you might want to get a little pair of pliers. A little pair of needle nose is what I use. You might have to use that to pull through the leather. Now, as you pull it up tight, I've got my thumb holding that little tail sticking up. And I've made an X. I don't know if you can see that X, but it's there. Here's the next key point. I'm going to go under that X. And as I go, I'm going to pull that little bitty tail out of the way with my other fingers, and I'm going to snug it up, and then I'm going to go through the next hole. What we are working towards is going under the X through the hole, under the X through the hole, under the X through the hole, under the X through the hole. Did I make that really clear? Because I hope I did, because that's all that this lacing is. You go through the X, you go through the hole. You go through the X, you go through the hole, over and over and over again. Pull it up snug. That's all. It doesn't have to be tight enough to strangle a nightcrawler. It just has to be snug. Now, big tip right here. You never let go of the needle. Ever. The only time you let go of the needle is if that needle is sticking under the X or in the hole. That's the only time you ever let go of that needle. Did I mention you never let go of the needle? I hope so, because that's really important. This is the part that gets more people screwed up in their double loop stitch style lacing than anything else. You grab a hold of it, pull it through. Now here's where people screw up, right here, right here. I'm going to show you how they make the mistake. They do this, and then they think they've got to hold the needle in their hand and pull this tight. Now that'll do just fine up to that point right there. And then they figure that since they've got that needle in their hand, all they have to do is this. And they've just twisted the lace. And it's a booger to get it untwisted. So what you do, if you ever have to let go of the needle, you take this lace, run it through your fingers, turn it around in your hand. Now I just went through the X. I'm going to keep this loop over here in front of me. I'm going to pull it out, pull it up tight. Now, my loops always pull up really easily. Yours won't. The reason mine do is because I've laced 12,647 wallets. That's why. Snug it up. Notice I have the needle in my hand. I'm going to turn it over. Just like that. Really easy. That makes this lace nothing but a big loop. Nice and straight. Just makes a big loop. Going through the X. Pull it nice and tight. Now, if you happen to get your lace caught up like this on a corner, hey, you got other fingers. Just use those. Don't let go of the needle. Don't let go of the needle. Don't do this. Keep it in your fingers. Pull it snug. Turn the needle over. Go through the hole. Okay? Now, I'm going to do that. I just went through the hole. Now I go through the X. Through the hole. And these are kind of snug holes. Through the hole. Turn the needle over. Through the X. Through the hole. Through the X. Now, as you snug up your lacing, use the same amount of tension on every stitch. Don't go cranking it down there, and then the next one you don't pull nearly so hard. My lacing almost wanted to twist, but I caught it before it did. So I used my other fingers, I have them, touch that lace, make it work. You have to get in the habit of doing that. You have to get into the habit of never letting go of the needle and never doing that, never grabbing it like that, and then going like this, because, like I said before, you will twist the lace. And when that lace is twisted and it's in that little bitty slit, it is really hard to get it undone. It's not that you can't do it, but unless you know what you're doing, it's very difficult. Most people will end up taking the lace out of the needle, pull the lace out, and then continuing on. Now, one thing I did not mention at the first, but I will now. When you see a common set of directions on how to do this particular style of lacing, usually when you start out, they will tell you to leave 2 inches of or 3 inches of lace sticking up here at the end. Well, that's silly. There is no need to do that. Just leave a little bit. You save lace. Now, I like lacing with kangaroo. Kangaroo lace is the best lace you can buy. It's soft, it's tough, it's also the most expensive, and I'm not trying to sell lace here. But I'm kind of lazy when it gets to some areas of my leather work. And I like stuff to work easy, not hard. So I use kangaroo because it is easy. Okay, so we're just happily chubbling along here through the X, through the hole, and after a while you get to the point where you can actually just pull each stitch up without having to do much more, because you've trained that little short piece of lace that you're working with, instead of trying to go pull 7 yards of lace through each hole, which is not happy. Unless you have a cat. A cat really appreciates all that lace. I speak from experience. I don't have a cat, but I had one. And I know they love lace hanging down beside your chair. Okay, so here we are, continuing on. Now I'm coming up to a corner, just so that you know. So I'm going to show you how to do a corner. You can do this a couple of different ways. Both are simple. Let's see here. I have a corner hole and 1 hole on each side of it. Now you can do this several ways, really. Again, remember, I'm lazy. So I do what it takes to make it work. So I'm going to go right up to the corner. I'm going to lace the hole right before the corner. Went through that one, went through the X, and now I'm through my corner hole. Now, if these camera people have done things right, you will have been able to see that my corner hole was round instead of a slit. That's because I'm going to go through that hole several times. It's easier to go through a round hole several times than it is a slit. You can do it, but it's easier to go through a round one than it is a slit. Now, some people like to go through the hole in front of the corner twice, and then they go through the corner twice. I am going to go through the corner twice. When you do that, you have to start being careful, because you're going through an X that you just created and nothing else. You're just going through that X, just like the rest of the lace, but it gets a little closer at hand, and sometimes, you might need glasses. That's why I carry these stupid things. Helps me see. So, I've gone through this corner 3 times. And I could do that easily because that hole was round. It doesn't have to be a great big huge hole, by the way. Just a round hole. I've gone through the corner 3 times. I went through the last X in that corner. Now I'm going to go to the hole on the other side of the corner. When you do that, it might look like the stitch is a little long, but really it's not. Use a finger to kind of keep your leather pushed off to the direction that you were coming from. And that'll make that stitch even out and look quite nice. And then you get to the point that we're at right now. I go through the X. Oh my goodness, I have run out of lace. So what do? Well, obviously the first thing you do is you cut yourself off a new piece of lace. Okay, let's see. Well, I lied. That's not the first thing you do. The first thing you do is you go through this hole, the next hole, and you try to come up between the leathers like that. Now, if you have a difficult time, that's what you use a modeling tool for. Stick that modeling tool down in between your leathers, open it up, there it is, and wiggle it around and get yourself some open space in there. Now, some things that you lace are not glued together. Believe me, this is a lot easier when they're not glued together. I glued this one together a little bit because I wanted to hold it in place while I was lacing. If you do that, and if you know you're going to lace something, don't get all carried away with the glue, because if you do, man, it just makes everything exponentially more difficult. That was like a big word. Do I get money for that? Probably not. Okay, so now I'm going through the hole, but instead of going all the way through the leather, I'm just coming up in the middle. Zap. There you are. Now, a lot of printed directions will show you how to do this, but I'm going to show you how to do it efficiently. I'm going to cut this off so there's about a 1/4 inch sticking up, if that. Now, they will tell you to leave 2 inches sticking up, or 1.5 inches. And then they'll tell you to hide the leather down in there or lace over the top of it, and that's fine. It works. But I don't care if you leave 1/8 of an inch sticking up. It's going to work. If you want, you can take your needle, and if you've got enough space, just push that little piece of leather down inside. Take your needle with your new piece of lace in it, go down between the leathers, and come out where you should have come out if you would not have run out of lace. That's pretty simple. Just come out right where you would have if you wouldn't have run out of lace. Pull it up until you've got just a little bit. And you know, the common complaint I get is people say, well, isn't your lace going to come undone because you only left that little bit out there? I'll tell you what. Remember I told you I made 12,647 wallets? I have never had a splice come apart. And I have never had anybody take a look at that wallet and say to me, yeah, I don't think you left 2 inches of lace there on your splice. Now, if they're doing that, you got problems with the customer. So here we are. If you've done what I said, come out the back of the leather where you should have. Keep hold of that needle. Don't let go. Go underneath the X, just like always, because it looks just like you never stopped lacing. And that's how you want it to look. You just continue on until you get to the next one. I can show you how to do that again if you want. Let's see. Okay. Just really quick. I'm going to open up this leather. I'm going to go underneath my X, going through the hole, up between the leathers, pull it tight, cut it off, go down between the leathers, and come out where I would have if I hadn't stopped. Hide those little pieces of lace if you want to. Hey, if you don't want to, lace right over the top of them. But it's kind of nice to hide them. Okay. Continue on just like you never stopped. Now, we're going to pretend I'm done. And I'm going to cut this lace off. I'm going to put in a new piece of lace, and I'm going to come back in about a few seconds, thanks to modern technology, and I'm going to show you how to end it. So now we're going to end it. I've got my lace in. We've come all the way around to where we're getting ready to come back into the lacing where we started. So the first thing we're going to do is take a modeling tool. Now here's something else. When they tell you to start your lace, most of them tell you to lace over this. I didn't tell you that. I told you to leave it sticking up. And that's a good idea because it's a lot easier to do what I'm going to do right now, which I'm going to pull that lace out. Then I'm going to pull it out from the back. This is what I've got so far. Then I'm going to pull it out one more time. And what I have is a little bitty loop right there. That loop is critical. I don't know if you can tell it or not from the camera, but this loop is inside of this loop, which is inside of that loop, which is inside of that loop. That's why they call it the double loop stitch. So this loop needs to be the same size as that one. So what I'm going to do is reach down between these leathers with this modeling tool. And I'm going to open up the leathers a little bit. And I'm going to hook that piece of lace. Or not. Just broke. Which is something you'll do occasionally. So that means I'm going to pull out one more stitch. Being difficult. Well, that's okay. Pull out one more stitch until I have my loop, just like before. There it is, a loop and a loop and a loop and a loop. Reaching down in between the leathers. Now, one thing you may remember, I told you that if you're going to glue this together, try not to use too much glue because it just makes your life more difficult. And this is the part that is a little bit more difficult. You have to kind of work that lace a little bit to where you can get under it and pull it up between the leathers. Well, when you do that, it screws up this loop. And it's going to do that every single time. So what you have to do is fix it. And that's what you got to do every single time. So you use this modeling tool, kind of pull that loop out a little bit there. If you need a little bit more lace, get under that from the back stitch. You get a little bit of lace so that you can continually work this loop until it is the same size as all these other loops. And it has to be really pretty close. The better job you do of doing that, the better your ending of your lace will be. Now that's the hard part. That is it. I could have made my life a little simpler if when I started lacing, I got up in between the leathers and I opened it up and had that all done, but I didn't. So there we are. I've got a loop and I've got this little tongue of lace sticking up through the leathers. I'm going to cut that off. So there's about 1/8 of an inch of leather left. That's it. Now we're going to end it. I start, now I'm 4 or 5 holes away from ending it. Through the hole, through the X, through the hole, through the X. Don't let go of your needle. Remember that. Through the hole, through the X. Now, there's 2 holes left. I'm going to go through the next to the last one. You pull it up tight. And here's the tricky part. You go up through that loop from the back. You may have to write this down, I don't know. Turn your needle over, just like we showed you. Through the X, just like normal. Pull it sort of tight, but not too tight. This is part of the tricky part. This is what screws people up. You go down through that same loop that you just came up through, but you come down to the front. Now, the better picture you can get of this, guys, the better it's going to be. Okay, so I'm going to pull it down. Now, I pull this up nice and snug. Then I pull this one up nice and snug. I work it just a little bit with my fingers, give it a little pull. You can see how it ends up, pretty nice. Then I'm going to go through the last hole and I'm going to make that needle come up off to the side between the leathers, and I'm going to pull it up. And for all practical purposes, you would never be able to see where I ended that lace. I'm going to cut the end off really close, really close to the back. And it's done. That thing is never going to come apart. Now, that's how to do the double loop stitch. Well, there's a problem, and that is, how do you lace just one piece of leather? Well, if you want to, you can use just one piece of lace that's great big long and everything else, and you might get through it that way without having to splice. But if you got to go clear around a big edge or something, you don't want to have to pull 6 yards of leather through every hole. You just want to use the same piece of lace that's, a yard and a half long. So we're going to show you how to do that in just a second. Next, we're going to learn to splice when you're only lacing through one layer of leather. First of all, everything else is the same. You start your lacing the same way. When you're coming out of a hole and you run out, or you're going to need to splice, you want to cut off some little bit. You need to leave some sticking out. It's good if you've left enough to work with. It could be a little more than this or a little less. And by the way, there's no good way to do this. You need a sharp knife. And I am going to skive this down to almost nothing. The first thing I did was snipped it off, and then I skived the thickness of the lace down to almost nothing. I skived it for maybe 5/16. You want to do a little more? That's kind of handy. Then you take your new lace and you skive the top side down about the same distance. This can be a little frustrating. It's not as easy as it looks. Skive it down to nothing. You remember I told you there's really no good way to do this? Well, that's the truth. So you look at your lace, make sure it's skived down to pretty much nothing. You need a little bit of glue. Now I've got a glue bottle here that's way too full of glue. So I'm going to take this little piece of lace, stick it in there, get a little bit of glue on it. And I'm going to very carefully put some contact cement on the area that I skived. Try and be careful. If you get too much on there, it's going to squish out, not be all that happy. Then you got to put it on your other piece of lace. I apologize in advance if you don't want to do this, but I'll tell you one thing, I don't want to do it either. And again, there is no good way for you to do this. You get that contact cement on there and you have to get it pretty much right up to where you skived. And as even a coat as you could possibly get. Then you have to wait. You got to wait till the dumb stuff dries enough or gets tacky enough for you to put it together. And if you don't, then this splice will come apart while you're trying to get up to that point where it needs to hold. Now, when you get this piece of lace put together, hopefully it will be very difficult for you to see where the splice starts and where it ends. Little extra glue on the sides I'm going to take off with my finger. I can clean my finger later. This is the side that has no contact cement on the back, but it has it on the front. So I'm going to position it there. If I would have not been so lazy, I probably would have waited a little longer for that glue to dry. But hey, I want to get it done. So I've got it pressed together. Now you got to be a little bit careful. Get that first stitch pulled through there. Looks like my lace separated just a little bit because I could have waited longer. Carefully pull it up. You just got to be careful. That's the whole deal. If you work things right, you're going to end up lacing right over the top of that splice anyway. And it's glued with a good quality contact cement, so you're not going to be able to see where you've spliced. You just have to be careful. At the very worst, if somebody gets up there and does this to your whole wallet, they might see it. Maybe. Probably not. And that's it for splicing. Otherwise, all the same rules apply. Now, there's one more thing I'll show you about lacing through a single piece of leather. Let's just pretend that I want to end this. So I'm going to cut it off. Have just a tad bit of a round corner. I'm going to lace up to the corner, and that's the end of my lace. Nowhere to go. It's done. So when you get done, how do you end it? I'll show you. I'm going to go through that last hole. Depending on how it looks, and this is totally up to you, you may want to go through that last hole twice. I think I will. I'm going to go through that last hole twice. Gives me a little bit of a bulk at the end. It lets it fit better into the look of the lace. Then, instead of coming around and going through an X or a hole, well, I'll go through the X one more time. Hey, why not? Then, I'm going to go underneath my lace on the back side of my project, and I'm going to work this a little bit. I'm going to go under about 4 stitches. I'm going to pull this up tight. Kind of a thin spot in my lace. That's a good place to do that. And I'm going to cut it off. And that's about as good as you're going to get when you end something that's only one layer of leather. There's a couple things you want to remember in lacing. Never lace with a great big long chunk of lace. Lace with a yard to a yard and a half. The needle isn't that critical, the type of needle, but don't let go of the stupid needle. Hang on to it. Turn it over after every loop. Turn it over with your fingers. You can do that. It's kind of magic. Fun. Turn it over. Learn to do that. Don't do this. Turn it over first. That keeps that leather loop, that lacing loop, nice and straight. If you see that you're twisting your lace, you need to think about what you're doing because you'll figure it out. Don't let go of the needle unless it's in a hole or in under that X. Then pull it, turn the needle over, and you're ready to go. Let's see, lastly, don't get carried away with glue when you're gluing your stuff together. Have a modeling tool handy so you can get the leather apart when you're splicing. And lace with good lace. Makes a difference. Can't think of anything else. Thanks. Bye.